I never let anyone into my wine cellar. Not friends, not family, not even my son until he turned 21. But when my son's new wife started asking about those dusty old bottles covered in cobwebs in the basement, I grew suspicious and installed a biometric lock with a code only I knew. Then I discovered she was desperately trying to get in. At that moment, I realized just how greedy my daughter-in-law truly was. But she didn't know I had uncovered another sinister secret of hers. Soon I would make her pay for every lie, every vicious, deceptive scheme. I'm truly grateful you're here today. Before we begin, please drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, your city or country. Quick note, this is a fictional story exploring meaningful themes about trust and family. Any resemblance to real people or places is purely coincidental. Let's begin. The biometric lock was ripped clean off the wall. I stood at the basement stairs, staring at my wine cellar door hanging open like a violated sanctuary. The steel panel I'd installed 8 weeks ago dangled by its wiring circuit board, exposed and glinting in the dim light. Someone was inside. I could hear the soft shuffle of movement, the barely audible click of a phone camera capturing images. My hand found the doorframe for support. In 40 years of aerospace engineering, I'd calculated stress loads on components that would carry human beings through the vacuum of space. I'd designed fail-safes and redundancies that couldn't be broken. Apparently, I'd failed to protect what mattered most. But let me start from the beginning, because to understand how I ended up here, you need to know who I was before everything changed. My name is Elliot Brennan. I'm 57 years old. And until 7 years ago, I had what most people would call a charmed life. 4 decades in aerospace engineering, designing HVAC systems for commercial aircraft, working alongside some of the brightest minds in the industry. A beautiful home in Burns Park, one of Ann Arbor's most serene neighborhoods, where autumn leaves collected like copper coins on our front walk. And Rosalind, my wife, my partner, my everything. Cancer took her when she was just 49. The doctors gave us 12 months. She lasted 16, fighting every single day with a grace that still breaks my heart to remember. The last month she couldn't leave our bedroom. But even then, even when morphine dulled the edges of her pain, she'd squeeze my hand and say, "Promise me you'll keep living, Elliot. Promise me you won't let this turn you into a ghost." I tried to keep that promise. Some days were easier than others. 5.5 years ago, after Rosalind passed, I threw myself into one final project, a revolutionary valve system for HVAC units that could reduce energy consumption by 18% while improving airflow efficiency. The patent came through 3 months after I submitted it, and the royalties started rolling in almost immediately. $31,500 a month like clockwork. 4 manufacturers licensing the technology, quarterly reports showing production numbers that still seem unreal. I retired the day the patent was granted. I'd spent 40 years building things for other people. It was time to build something for myself. The wine cellar became my sanctuary. Rosalind and I had started collecting wine together 15 years into our marriage. Not the expensive investment-grade bottles that sit in climate-controlled vaults as financial instruments. We bought wines. We wanted to drink wines that marked moments we wanted to remember. A 2005 Napa Cabernet from our 20th anniversary trip. A 1998 Bordeaux we'd opened the night Dominic graduated college. A case of Oregon Pinot Noir from a weekend getaway to Portland, where we'd done nothing but walk in the rain and laugh. After she died, I couldn't bear to drink them, but I couldn't bear to get rid of them either. So I built her a shrine. The basement renovation took me 8 months. I installed professional-grade climate control, 55 degrees Fahrenheit, 70% humidity monitored by sensors. I calibrated myself. Custom racks to hold 300 bottles arranged by region and vintage. A small tasting table where Rosalind and I used to sit on Saturday evenings, debating whether we could detect notes of black currant or just wanted to. I go down there most nights now. Not to drink, I rarely open the bottles anymore. I go there to remember, to talk to her even though I know she can't answer, to feel for just a few moments like I'm not completely alone in this house. The collection is worth somewhere between $180,000 and $220,000 now, depending on who's appraising it. But the real value isn't in the bottles. It's in the filing cabinet I installed behind the back rack hidden from casual view, the one containing my patent documentation, licensing agreements, investment portfolios, and the detailed financial records of everything I've built since Rosalind died. Everything someone might want if they knew where to look. My son doesn't know about the cabinet. Dominic knows about the wine collection. Of course, he helped me install the cooling system, but I've never shown him the documents. There's never been a reason to. He's got his own life, his own career as a civil engineer. He's building bridges while I'm preserving memories. Dominic is 30 now, the same age I was when I married his mother. He has Rosalind's eyes, that particular shade of hazel that shifts between green and gold depending on the light, and my methodical approach to problem solving. He's thoughtful, careful, maybe too trusting for his own good. After Rosalind died, he moved back home for a year to make sure I was okay. We fell into an easy rhythm. Sunday morning coffee conversations about engineering problems. Quiet dinners where we'd remember his mother without falling apart. Eventually, he got his own apartment downtown, but we still had our routines. Weekly dinners. Phone calls that lasted hours. The comfortable silence of two people who understand each other's grief. It was peaceful, safe, predictable, until 10 months ago when everything changed. Dominic came home from a structural engineering conference in Chicago with an expression I hadn't seen on his face since he was a teenager. Bright-eyed, breathless, transformed. He found me in the garage organizing my workshop, and the words tumbled out of him before I could even set down my tools. "Dad," he said, his whole face lit up like he'd just solved an impossible equation. "I met someone." That was when everything changed. I set down my socket wrench and gave Dominic my full attention. His eyes were shining in a way I hadn't seen since before Rosalind died, like someone had switched on a light inside him. "Tell me about her," I said. He pulled out his phone, swiped through photos. "Her name is Genevieve Walsh, 28, interior designer from Austin." He turned the screen toward me. The woman in the photo was striking. Dark hair designer dress, standing in a renovated loft with exposed brick. Everything about the image suggested polish and control. "We met at the hotel bar in Chicago," Dominic continued. "Started talking about structural engineering at 10, didn't stop until 3 in the morning. She actually cared about load-bearing calculations, Dad. About how spaces shape people's lives." Over the next weeks, Genevieve became his only topic. She drove up from Austin every other weekend, 7 hours each way, without complaint. They'd disappear for entire Saturdays, returning with stories about galleries and restaurants I'd never heard of. By March, 4 months after they'd met, Dominic approached me during our Sunday morning coffee. "Genevieve's lease is up next month. She's thinking about relocating to Michigan." His hands weren't quite steady. "Would it be okay if she stayed here just until we figure things out?" Every instinct screamed no. 4 months wasn't enough time. But then I heard Rosalind's voice clear as if she were standing beside me. "Give him a chance, Elliot. Let him make his own choices." "She's welcome here," I said. Genevieve arrived on a Saturday in early April, driving a BMW that looked out of place on our street. Designer jeans, cashmere sweater, leather boots that probably cost more than I used to make in a week. "Mr. Brennan," she said, extending a manicured hand. "Dominic has told me so much about you, and about your beautiful Rosalind. I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you. Call me Elliot." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. That first dinner was pleasant. She praised my roast chicken, asked thoughtful questions about aerospace engineering. Then the conversation shifted. "This is such a lovely neighborhood," she said. Burns Park right properties here must be worth quite a bit. I suppose. You've been here 25 years, she sipped her wine. The equity you must have built up. Do you own any other properties in the area? Dominic jumped in. Jen's always thinking about investments. She helps clients optimize spaces for resale value. Something about the question set off an alarm I couldn't articulate. Over the following months, there were other moments. The way she'd pause outside the basement door, asking what was down there. Her interest in my retirement plans, monthly income, whether I'd set up a trust for Dominic. Questions that could have been innocent but felt calculated. 4 months later, Dominic found me in the workshop holding a velvet box. Princess-cut diamond, 3 months' salary. I'm asking her tonight, he said. I know it's fast, but when you've found the right person, you just know. You and Mom were the same engaged after 4 months. He was right, but Rosalind and I had known each other 2 years before that first date. We'd built a foundation first. I knew almost nothing about Genevieve Walsh. Have you met her family? I asked. His expression flickered. Not yet. Complicated childhood, she doesn't talk about it. But she's excited about being part of our family. She talks about you all the time, Dad. How kind you've been, how much she respects what you and Mom built. What could I say that my instincts were screaming warnings I couldn't articulate? I'm happy for you, son. The wedding took place in our backyard in September. 50 guests, white tent string lights in the maples. Genevieve wore a magazine-worthy gown and moved through the reception like she'd been born to command attention. She found me by the wine table as the sun set. Elliot, she said, taking my hands. I want you to know how much this means. Having your blessing. Being welcomed into this family. Her eyes were bright with what might have been tears. I hope I can honor Rosalind's memory. I hope I can make Dominic as happy as she made you. It was perfect. Too perfect. 3 days after the wedding, returning from their Aruba honeymoon, Genevieve made her suggestion over dinner. The Elliot, Dominic and I have been talking. Her hand rested on my son's. Why don't we move back here at least for a while? Family should be together, especially after everything you've been through. This house is too big for one person. Dominic looked at me with such hope. How could I say no? You're always welcome here, I said. That was my second mistake. They moved in on the last Saturday of September, when the maples in Burns Park were just beginning to turn orange at their edges. I'd expected furniture boxes the accumulated weight of a 28-year-old's life. Instead, Genevieve arrived with 3 suitcases and a handful of carefully curated decorative items, a modern sculpture, 2 abstract paintings, a set of designer throw pillows. I sold most of my things, she explained when I asked about the sparse collection. Fresh start, you know, besides your home is already so beautifully appointed. I wouldn't want to clutter it with my old furniture. It seemed reasonable enough, but something about it felt off, like a play where the actress hadn't quite memorized all her props. The first week, Genevieve was the model daughter-in-law. She helped with cooking, learned how I organized the kitchen, asked permission before rearranging anything. She laughed at my engineering jokes and listened attentively when I talked about the HVAC industry. Dominic walked around with a permanent grin, clearly pleased that his 2 favorite people were getting along. On the 3rd morning, a Monday, I woke to a soft knock on my bedroom door. Elliot. Genevieve's voice was gentle. You looked so tired last night. Why don't you let me make your coffee this morning? Cream and 2 sugars, right? I've been watching how you take it. I should have said no. Should have kept that small morning ritual as my own. But she seemed so genuinely kind, and Dominic was standing behind her in the hallway, beaming with pride at his wife's thoughtfulness. That would be lovely, I said. Thank you. 20 minutes later, she appeared with a steaming mug, one of Rosalind's old cups, actually with a chipped handle that I'd never had the heart to throw away. The coffee was perfect, exactly the right temperature, exactly the right sweetness. It became our routine. Every morning, Genevieve would bring coffee to my study while I checked emails and reviewed my patent royalty statements. She'd set it down with a smile, ask about my plans for the day, then disappear to let me work in peace. It was considerate, caring, the kind of gesture a good daughter-in-law would make. I never questioned it. 2 weeks after they moved in during dinner one evening, Genevieve's attention drifted to the basement door off the kitchen. I've been meaning to ask," she said, twirling pasta onto her fork with practiced elegance. "What's down there? I keep seeing you go down those stairs, but I've never actually seen what's below." "Wine cellar," I said simply. "Climate-controlled storage for my collection." "Dad's extremely protective of it," Dominic added with a laugh. "I helped install the cooling system years ago, but even I'm not allowed down there without an invitation. It's like his private museum." Genevieve's expression shifted just for a moment into something that looked like calculation. Her eyes brightened with an interest that seemed disproportionate to the topic. A wine collection," she said slowly. "That must be quite valuable. Temperature control, proper storage, you must have some really special bottles down there." "Some," I acknowledged, not meeting her gaze. "I'd love to see it sometime," she said. "I studied some wine pairings when I was working with restaurant clients in Austin. It's such a fascinating world, the investment potential alone." Investment potential. Not appreciation for the wines themselves, not curiosity about the stories behind the bottles. Investment. "Maybe sometime," I said noncommittally. That night I couldn't sleep. Around 2 in the morning I got up for water and noticed a thin line of light under the kitchen door. When I opened it, the kitchen was dark, but I could have sworn I heard the soft click of the basement doorknob being tested, followed by quick footsteps retreating up the stairs to the guest suite. The next morning, I drove to the hardware store and installed a simple keyed deadbolt on the wine cellar door. Nothing sophisticated, just enough to keep casual curiosity at bay. I told myself I was being paranoid, that Genevieve was simply interested in design and aesthetics, that I was reading malice into innocent questions. But I kept the only key on my personal keyring anyway. The questions continued, subtle but persistent. Over breakfast one Saturday, Genevieve asked about life insurance. Did I have a policy? Was Dominic the beneficiary? She framed it as concern, mentioned an article she'd read about estate planning. A few days later, she wondered aloud whether I'd updated my will, recently mentioned how important it was to have documentation in order. "You never know what might happen," she said with a sympathetic smile. "It's just smart planning." Dominic thought she was being practical. "Jen's really good with financial stuff, Dad. She helped me set up my retirement accounts last month." I nodded and changed the subject. But I started keeping notes. Small observations that probably meant nothing but that I couldn't shake. The way she'd pause outside the wine cellar door just for a moment, as if listening. Her interest in my monthly royalty statements, which I'd accidentally left visible on my desk one morning. The way she'd steered conversations toward my net worth, my property, value, my long-term plans. Always subtle, always plausible, always deniable. The next morning, Genevieve brought my coffee with her usual sweet smile. I took a sip while opening my laptop to check the morning news. It tasted different, slightly bitter with an aftertaste that lingered unpleasantly on my tongue. Probably just a new brand, I told myself. She must have picked up something different at the store. I drank it anyway. By late October, I'd caught Genevieve lingering near the wine cellar door 3 separate times. The first time I came down from my study to find her, crouched beside the deadbolt doing something with her hands I couldn't quite see. When she heard my footsteps, she straightened quickly, her expression shifting from concentration to concern in a heartbeat. "Elliot, thank goodness," she said, touching her chest. I thought I heard the smoke detector going off down there. Were you doing anything in the cellar? No, I said slowly. The smoke detector down there hasn't gone off in 5 years. Must have been the heating system then. She smiled and moved past me toward the stairs. These old houses always making strange noises. I checked the cellar that night. No alarms, no strange noises, nothing out of place except the faint scratches around the deadbolt that hadn't been there before. That same week I experienced my first real memory lapse. I'd put my car keys down somewhere I was certain of it, but when I went to leave for the hardware store, they'd vanished. 15 minutes of searching through coat pockets, kitchen drawers, the workshop. I finally found them in my jacket, exactly where they should have been. You're getting old, I told my reflection in the hallway mirror. 57 wasn't ancient, but Rosalind had been gone 7 years. Maybe grief had finally caught up with my mind, the way it had already hollowed out my heart. The second incident happened a week later. I was trimming the hedge along our property line when Norman Webb, our 65-year-old neighbor, called over from his driveway. Elliot got a minute. Norman had lived next door for 20 years, retired from teaching high school mathematics. He was the kind of neighbor who noticed everything, not in a nosy way, but with the quiet attention of someone who'd spent decades watching teenagers try to get away with things. I don't want to overstep, he said, lowering his voice, though we were alone. But I've seen your daughter-in-law a few times now walking around to the back of your house. Yesterday she was looking through one of the basement windows for a good 5 minutes. Just thought you should know. My stomach tightened. Which window? The one near the corner closest to the garage. She was on her phone, seemed to be taking pictures of something. The wine cellar window, the one I'd never bothered to cover because it was barely visible from outside, tucked behind landscaping and half hidden by the deck stairs. Thanks, Norman, I managed. I appreciate you telling me. That afternoon, I drove to a security supply store in downtown Ann Arbor and purchased a keypad deadbolt with a biometric backup, professional grade, the kind used in laboratories and server rooms. The keypad required a 6-digit code. I set it to Rosalind's birthday, 042775, April 27, 1975. Installing it took me 2 hours. When I finished, the old deadbolt sat on my workbench, scratched and compromised. The new system gleamed in the dim basement light, its digital display glowing softly. That evening, Genevieve noticed immediately. New lock, she asked, pausing on her way through the kitchen. The old one was sticking. I lied. Must be quite a lock. Looks expensive. She moved closer, examining the keypad. What's the code in case there's an emergency? I'll remember it, I said. Oh, it's just for the wine. For just a moment, less than a second, her expression hardened into something cold and calculating. Then the mask slipped back into place and she was smiling again. Of course, she said sweetly. Your private sanctuary. I understand completely. But I'd seen what lay beneath the smile. 3 days later, I forgot an entire lunch appointment. Marshall Reed, Dominic's friend and colleague from the engineering firm, had invited me to discuss a consulting opportunity. I'd written it in my calendar, set a reminder on my phone, mentioned it to Dominic at breakfast. And then I'd simply forgotten. Marshall called at 1:30, concerned. With Elliot, are you okay? You were supposed to meet me at Tony's an hour ago. I stared at my calendar, at my own handwriting, confirming the appointment. I'm sorry, Marshall. I don't know what happened. I completely blanked. No worries, it happens. But maybe get some rest. Dominic mentioned you've been stressed lately. After I hung up, I sat in my study for a long time, trying to remember the morning. I could recall breakfast. Genevieve had brought my coffee as always. I could remember checking my emails, but the hours between then and Marshall's call were fuzzy, like trying to see through fog. That night, I stood at my bedroom window and watched the backyard. Around 11, a shadow moved near the basement window. Genevieve, illuminated by her phone screen, crouched beside the glass. She stayed there for 10 minutes, trying different combinations on the keypad I could just barely see from my angle. She was methodical, starting from zeros, working through number sequences. She didn't know I was watching from 2 stories up, didn't know that the lock would freeze after 5 incorrect attempts, requiring a biometric reset only I could provide. At dinner the next evening, I overheard her talking to Dominic while I was in the hallway just out of sight. "Your father seems so forgetful lately," she said, her voice pitched with concern. "He forgot his keys twice this week, missed that lunch with Marshall. Maybe we should take him to see a neurologist, get some cognitive testing done." "Dad's always been sharp," Dominic replied, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "You really think something's wrong?" "I just worry about him living alone," Genevieve said. "He's at his age with the stress of managing all those patent royalties and that valuable wine collection. Maybe it's too much. Maybe he needs more support than he realizes." I retreated to my study before they could hear my footsteps. That night I went down to the wine cellar and stood among Rosalind's bottles. The temperature was perfect, the humidity precise, everything exactly as it should be. I touched the 2005 Napa Cabernet from our anniversary, the label worn at the edges from my frequent handling. "She's hunting for something, Russ," I whispered to the silence. "Money, obviously. But these memory lapses, am I actually losing my mind? Or is she doing something I can't see yet?" The bottles held no answers. But standing there, surrounded by our memories, I felt a clarity I hadn't experienced in weeks. Something was wrong. Not with me, with her. With this whole situation. The next morning, I did what any father in 2024 would do when suspicion finally outweighed denial. I Googled her. Her website looked professional. Too professional. GenevieveWalshDesign.com had sleek portfolio images, glowing testimonials, and an upscale Austin address. But 40 years in aerospace engineering had taught me to trust my instincts when something didn't add up. The domain registration showed the site had been created 7 months before Dominic met her in Chicago. 7 months, just enough time to establish a digital presence. I ran the portfolio images through reverse search. Every single photo came from stock photography sites. The testimonials referenced clients who didn't exist online. The business address was a virtual mailbox service. Her social media was worse. 15,000 followers, but each post had maybe 20 likes and a handful of generic comments. I'd seen enough to recognize purchased followers and fake engagement, all facade, no substance. Then I found the forum post. Buried in an online relationship community posted 14 months ago, fiancé disappeared with $75,000 after I proposed warning to others. A Houston engineer described a woman named Emily Foster. 27 interior designer met at a conference. Whirlwind romance, moved in fast, got engaged. She'd been particularly interested in his elderly father's property, suggested assisted living. 3 weeks after the engagement, she'd cleaned out his savings and vanished. The physical description matched Genevieve exactly. The archived profile screenshots showed the same face, different name. I sat back from my computer, hands trembling. That night, I did what engineers do best. I documented everything. I created a spreadsheet tracking dates, symptoms, and observations. The pattern was undeniable. Every severe headache, every memory lapse, they peaked within 2 hours of drinking Genevieve's morning coffee. The 3 times I'd skipped coffee for early appointments, I'd felt clear-headed all day. The data didn't lie. I needed an outside perspective. The next afternoon, I met Marshall Reed at a downtown coffee shop. "Is this about Genevieve?" he asked once we'd settled into a corner booth. "What makes you say that?" Marshall shifted uncomfortably. "Dom's my best friend, so I've kept quiet. But that first time she came to your house, she spent more time asking about property values than getting to know anyone. It felt like she was appraising the place. I showed him the website analysis, the forum post, and my symptom spreadsheet. His expression grew grim. "You need a private investigator. This is beyond internet research." He was right. Gerald Paxton's office was near the University of Michigan campus. 53 former Ann Arbor PD detective, now specializing in fraud cases. I spread my evidence across his desk, website, screenshots, the forum post, my symptom tracking. "The wine cellar is key," I explained. "That's where I keep my patent documentation, licensing agreements, investment portfolios." She's been obsessed with accessing it since she moved in. Gerald studied the materials with methodical attention. Classic pattern. Elder financial abuse targeting widowers with assets. The poisoning angle is extreme but not unheard of. "Can you find out who she really is?" "I'll need a few days. But if she's drugging you, every day counts." "Have you considered the police?" "With what spreadsheet and internet searches? She'll say I'm paranoid, that my memory issues prove mental decline. My son will believe her." "Then we build a case first," Gerald said. "I'll investigate Emily Foster, track other identities, pull financial and criminal records. Meanwhile, stop drinking anything she prepares. Cut back on caffeine, whatever excuse works." I left feeling both relieved and terrified. Someone else knew. Someone believed me. But I still had to go home and pretend nothing had changed. When I walked through the door that evening, Genevieve was waiting in the kitchen with fresh coffee. "There you are," she said brightly. "I made your favorite. You were gone so long." She handed me the mug, Rosalind's chipped cup, and watched as I raised it to my lips. Watched very carefully, with an intensity I finally recognized as significant. Why did she care so much whether I drank it? I took a small sip, then set it down. "Actually, I'll save this for after dinner." Something flickered across her face. Disappointment. Frustration. "Of course," she said smoothly. That night, I made a new entry in my symptom journal, day 47, severe headache this morning. For the first time, I couldn't remember Rosalind's birthday when filling out a medical form. Stood there for 5 minutes, completely blank on the date I'd celebrated for 26 years. The panic was worse than the memory loss itself. Genevieve suggested a neurologist again at dinner, said she'd researched specialists in early onset dementia. Is this disease? Or something else entirely? I locked the journal in my desk drawer next to the USB drive containing everything I'd found. Tomorrow, Gerald would start digging. Tomorrow I'd have answers. Tonight, I just had to survive. By Thanksgiving, I couldn't remember what I'd eaten for breakfast. By early December, I couldn't remember whether I'd eaten breakfast at all. The deterioration was accelerating in ways that terrified me. I'd stand in the kitchen holding a coffee mug. Not Genevieve's coffee, I'd stopped drinking that 2 weeks ago, and forget why I was there. I'd walk into rooms and lose track of my purpose. Names of colleagues I'd worked with for decades would vanish mid-sentence. The worst incident happened 3 days before Thanksgiving. I was driving to the grocery store, a route I'd taken at least once a week for 15 years. Straight down Washtenaw Avenue, right on Packard, left into the parking lot. Simple. Automatic. Except suddenly nothing looked familiar. I couldn't remember where I was going or how I'd gotten there. The street signs meant nothing. Panic seized my chest like a vice. I pulled over onto the shoulder hands, shaking so badly I could barely shift into park. And then I sat there and cried. 57 years old, crying in my car because I couldn't remember how to get to the grocery store. I don't know how long I sat there before my phone rang. "Genevieve, Elliot, where are you? You left over an hour ago." I got turned around. "Stay there. I'll come find you." Her voice was all concern, all tenderness. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed it was genuine. She found me 20 minutes later, pulled up behind my car with her hazard lights flashing. When she got in the passenger seat, I saw something flicker across her face, not worry, but calculation. "Dad shouldn't be driving alone anymore," she said, gently touching my arm. "This is getting dangerous." The Thanksgiving dinner was a disaster. Dominic had invited Marshall and a few other friends. 8 people around our dining room table, conversation flowing around me like a river I couldn't quite reach. I'd lose the thread of discussions mid-sentence, forget what question someone had just asked me, repeat myself without realizing it. I caught Marshall watching me with concern, caught Dominic's worried glances toward Genevieve, silently asking what to do. After dinner, while I was in the kitchen pretending to help with dishes, I heard Genevieve talking to Dominic in the living room. Her voice was low but clear enough to carry. "We need to think about memory care facilities," she said. "Places with specialists who understand cognitive decline. Your father would be safer there with professionals monitoring him 24/7. "He's only 57, Dominic protested weakly. "Isn't that young for—" "Age doesn't matter when safety is at risk. What happens next time he gets lost? What if he leaves the stove on? There are excellent facilities in Ann Arbor. I've been researching them." Of course she had. I walked into the living room, my hands still wet from dishwater. "I don't need a nursing home." They both startled. Genevieve recovered first, her expression shifting to sympathy. "Elliot, no one's talking about a nursing home. Just support. Resources. Maybe having someone check in on you during the day." I said no. The anger felt good, felt real. It cut through the fog that had been clouding my mind for weeks. I saw Genevieve's mask slip for just a moment, saw the frustration underneath. The next morning, I ordered the biometric lock, professional-grade fingerprint scanner, the kind used in laboratories and secure facilities. It arrived 3 days later. I installed it that same afternoon, my hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. The familiar work of mounting hardware, running wiring, calibrating sensors, it brought me back to myself, reminded me who I'd been before the fog. The lock required my fingerprint. Only mine. No code, to guess no key, to steal no way in without my physical presence. Genevieve appeared in the kitchen doorway while I was testing the system. Another upgrade. Her voice was light, but I caught the edge beneath it. "What's in their gold bars?" "The insurance company requires enhanced security for collections over a certain value." I lied smoothly. "Part of the policy terms." "I see." She moved closer, examining the scanner. "And I suppose you're the only one with access. That's how biometrics work. What if there's an emergency? What if something happens to you and Dominic needs to get in there? Then Dominic can call a locksmith." For a long moment she just stared at me, really stared, as if trying to see through to whatever was left of my mind. Then she smiled, cold and sharp, and nothing like the warmth she usually performed. "Of course," she said. "Your sanctuary, I understand." She left without another word. That night my phone rang. Gerald Paxton. "Mr. Brennan, I have the report. We need to meet immediately, and it needs to be before anyone knows you've left the house. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning, early?" "How early?" 8 a.m. "And Elliot, don't tell anyone where you're going." I arrived at Gerald's office at 7:55 the next morning, having told Genevieve I had a doctor's appointment. The waiting room was empty, the building quiet. Gerald met me at the door, his expression grim. He led me to his office and placed a thick folder on the desk between us. "Mr. Brennan," he said, opening the folder to reveal photographs, documents, and printed reports. "Your daughter-in-law is not who she says she is. Her name isn't Genevieve Walsh." He slid a driver's license photo across the desk. Same face, different name. "Her real name is Genevieve Volkov, and this isn't the first time she's done this. Genevieve Volkov, 28 years old, 3 prior engagements, 2 suspicious deaths, 1 missing person. Gerald spread photographs across his desk like evidence at a crime scene. Different faces, different names, same woman. She targets young men with wealthy, aging parents. He continued, his voice clinical, but his expression grim. The pattern is consistent across 4 confirmed cases, possibly more we haven't uncovered yet. He pulled out a file marked Morrison James, Columbus, OH. 18 months ago, Patrick Morrison, 32, structural engineer, met a woman named Elena Foster at a professional conference. Interior designer, charming, moved fast. 4 months later, they were engaged. 6 months after that, she'd moved into his father's home. The similarities made my skin crawl. Patrick's father was Dr. James Morrison, cardiologist, 61 years old, recently widowed, healthy, active, sharp as a tack, according to colleagues. Gerald slid a photo across the desk, a silver-haired man in a white coat, confident smile. 3 weeks after Elena moved in, Dr. Morrison started experiencing memory problems, forgot appointments, got confused during procedures. Within 2 months, he could barely function. Let me guess, I said, my voice hollow. Well, Elena suggested a memory care facility. She insisted on it, said Dr. Morrison was a danger to himself and his patients. Patrick was distraught but agreed. His father entered a nursing home in January of last year. He died 6 months later, diagnosis rapid onset dementia. Gerald pulled out another document. Elena inherited $3.2 million through Patrick Dr. Morrison's estate life insurance, the family home in an upscale Columbus suburb. She stayed married to Patrick for exactly 4 months after the father's death, then filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. Took half of everything in the settlement. Where is she now? Where do you think? Gerald looked at me steadily. She's in your kitchen, Elliot. The room felt too small, the air too thin. What about the other cases? Dallas, 2 years before Ohio. Houston, 6 months before Dallas. Same pattern, young professional, wealthy parent, rapid cognitive decline, nursing home death, inheritance. Different names each time. We've got Emily Foster in Houston, Victoria Kane in Dallas, Elena Foster in Ohio, now Genevieve Walsh in Michigan. How did she get away with it? Because she's smart. She waits just long enough. The victims are older, showing some natural age-related changes. The decline seems plausible. The families are grieving, not suspicious. By the time anyone might question it, she's moved to another state with a new identity. Gerald leaned forward. But here's what matters, Elliot. Doctor, Morrison's symptoms, the sudden onset, the rapid progression, the specific pattern of memory loss, they're identical to what you've described. And there's more. He pulled out a medical report. After Dr. Morrison died, one of his colleagues pushed for a more thorough investigation. The toxicology screen found traces of benzodiazepines and antipsychotics in his system, drugs that weren't prescribed to him. Drugs that, when administered regularly, can mimic dementia symptoms almost perfectly. My hands were shaking. The coffee. Most likely, it's the perfect delivery system. Daily routine, trusted person, no one questions it. How did she get the drugs? That's easier than you'd think. Multiple identities, multiple doctors, claims of anxiety or insomnia. She fills prescriptions in different states under different names, and no single doctor sees the pattern. I felt sick. All those mornings, all those perfectly prepared cups with the chipped handle. All those times she'd watched me drink, making sure I finished every drop. The police need to know about this, I said. They will. But first you need to protect yourself legally. If she's following the same pattern, she'll push harder for nursing home placement, now that you've blocked access to the wine cellar. Once you're declared incompetent, she can make medical decisions on your behalf through Dominic. That afternoon, I met with Warren Blackwell at his office downtown. 57 estate planning specialist, someone I'd worked with years ago when Rosalind and I had first drawn up our wills. I laid out everything: Gerald's report, the pattern, my symptoms, the timeline. Warren listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When I finished, he was already pulling up documents on his computer. "We need to move fast," he said. "Irrevocable trust, medical directives, and documentation of your current mental competency." We spent 3 hours restructuring everything. My assets, the house, the patent royalties, the investment portfolios, everything in the wine cellar went into an irrevocable trust with Dominic as the sole beneficiary. Genevieve couldn't touch any of it, even if something happened to me. Even if Dominic died, it would go to charities I designated, not to his spouse. The medical directive was equally important. No nursing home placement without a second opinion from a physician of my choosing. No medical decisions made on my behalf without explicit documentation from 2 independent doctors confirming I lacked capacity. "This protects you," Warren said as I signed the final documents. But Elliot, you need to understand, if she's been poisoning you, stopping now won't immediately reverse the effects. You need to see a doctor, get tested, start documenting everything." "I will. But first I need to go home and pretend nothing has changed." The drive back felt surreal, like moving through a nightmare I couldn't wake from. Every street looked familiar now. The fog had lifted slightly, since I'd stopped drinking her coffee 5 days ago. But I knew I wasn't out of danger yet. Genevieve was in the kitchen when I arrived, apron on, something savory simmering on the stove. She turned as I entered, holding out a mug. "There you are," she said with that practiced warmth. "Your coffee still hot." I looked at the chipped handle, at the steam rising from the surface, at her smile, sweet and patient and utterly false. For the first time I saw the monster beneath the mask. "Thank you," I said, taking the mug. I carried it to my study, closed the door, and set it on my desk without taking a single sip. The coffee sat there all evening, growing cold and harmless. That night, I placed the untouched mug on my bedside table where I could see it. A reminder of what I'd almost drunk, what I'd been drinking for weeks, what had almost killed me. That night, after I heard Genevieve's bedroom door close, I carried the untouched coffee to my bathroom and poured it down the sink. I watched the brown liquid swirl away, taking with it weeks of fog and confusion and fear. The next morning, I woke with the clearest head I'd had in months. Genevieve appeared at my study door at 7:30, right on schedule, holding the familiar chipped mug. "Good morning," she said brightly. "Your coffee." I'd prepared my excuse carefully. "Actually, I saw my doctor yesterday. He's concerned about my blood pressure and wants me to cut back on caffeine. I'm switching to decaf for a while." Something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe frustration, but she recovered smoothly. "Of course, your health comes first. I'll pick up some decaf at the store today." "Don't worry about it," I said quickly. "I've been thinking about cutting it out entirely. Maybe switch to tea. If you're sure." She carried the coffee away, and I didn't miss the tightness in her shoulders. By the 3rd day without her coffee, the transformation was undeniable. The fog lifted. The headaches vanished. I could remember conversations from that morning, could recall where I'd put my keys, could navigate to the grocery store without a moment's hesitation. I stood in my workshop and calculated load-bearing specifications for a hypothetical structure. Marshall had mentioned, the numbers flowing through my mind like water after a drought. The coffee. It had been the coffee all along, but I couldn't let Genevieve know I'd figured it out. So I continued my performance, moving a little slower, pausing as if trying to remember things, asking questions I already knew the answers to. I saw relief in her expression. Each time I seemed confused, Saw calculation in the way she'd mention memory care facilities in casual conversation. On the fourth day, I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Gloria Martinez. I'd chosen her carefully, 49 years old, sharp and no-nonsense, with a reputation for taking patients seriously. More importantly, she had no connection to Genevieve, no prior relationship that could be influenced or manipulated. Her office was in a medical building near the University of Michigan Hospital. I arrived early carrying a folder containing Gerald's report and my own documentation. "Dr. Martinez," I said once we were alone in the exam room, "I need to tell you something that's going to sound impossible, but I need you to listen to everything before you respond." I told her all of it. The timeline, the symptoms, the pattern Gerald had uncovered, the Ohio case, the coffee ritual. I showed her my symptom tracking spreadsheet, the correlation between coffee consumption and cognitive decline, the dramatic improvement since I'd stopped drinking it. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each detail. "I need comprehensive blood and urine tests," I finished. "I need to know what she's been putting in my system." Dr. Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out her prescription pad and started writing. "Full toxicology panel," she said. "So blood work, urinalysis screening for benzodiazepines, antipsychotics. Anything that could produce the symptoms you've described. The lab can have results in 48 hours. "Thank you. Elliot." She looked at me directly. "If what you're telling me is true and based on what you've shown me, I believe it is, this is a crime. A serious one. I'll need to report it." "I know, but I need 1 week. I need video evidence of her doing it. Otherwise, it's my word against hers, and she'll say I'm paranoid, that my memory problems prove I'm unstable." She hesitated, then nodded. "1 week. But if anything escalates, if you feel unsafe, you come straight here or you call 911. Understood." 48 hours later, she called me back to her office. The test results were spread across her desk like an indictment. She pointed to highlighted numbers, her voice clinical, but her anger barely contained. "Lorazepam. It's a benzodiazepine commonly prescribed for anxiety. You have levels in your system consistent with daily dosing over an extended period. And quetiapine, that's an antipsychotic, also consistent with regular administration. What would those drugs do to someone who didn't need them? Exactly what you experienced. Confusion, memory loss, difficulty concentrating. The combination would make you seem cognitively impaired, possibly demented. Long-term use could cause actual neurological damage." She closed the file. "Elliot, this is chemical assault. I'm required by law to report suspected elder abuse." "I know, and I will go to the police. But please give me 1 week to document it. To catch her in the act. Otherwise, she'll disappear like she did in Ohio, and she'll do this to someone else." Dr. Martinez studied me for a long moment. 1 week, not a day more. "Bilan, the next morning, while Genevieve was at the grocery store, I let the installation technician into the house. He was recommended by Gerald, discreet and professional. In 45 minutes, he'd installed 3 tiny cameras in the kitchen, one above the cabinet, where she kept the coffee supplies, one with a clear view of the counter, where she prepared my morning cup, and one focused on the area near the sink. The feeds went directly to my phone and laptop, password-protected cloud, backed up, time-stamped, and dated. "You'll have everything you need," the technician said as he packed up his equipment. "High-definition clear audio. Just make sure you don't let on that you know." After he left, I stood in the kitchen and studied the room. The cameras were invisible unless you knew where to look. Tomorrow morning, Genevieve would perform her ritual, the one she'd been performing for months. And this time, I'd have proof. I just had to wait and remind myself, no matter how convincing she was, no matter how sweet her smile or how concerned her expression absolutely do not drink the coffee. For the next week, I delivered the performance of my life. I shuffled when I walked, paused mid-sentence as if searching for words. Asked Dominic the same question twice in one conversation. Left cabinet doors open, forgot where I'd set down my reading glasses, stared at the television without really watching. All while the cameras in the kitchen captured the truth. The first alert came on December 18th at 6:47 in the morning. My phone buzzed with a motion notification while I was still in bed. I opened the app and watched the feed in real time. Genevieve entered the kitchen in her robe, moving with the quiet efficiency of routine. She started the coffee maker, pulled down my chipped mug from the cabinet. Then she reached into her designer purse, the one she always kept on the kitchen counter, and extracted a small prescription bottle. My hands were shaking as I held the phone, but I kept watching. She shook 2 pills into her palm, white, round, unmarked. Then she took a spoon from the drawer and used the back of it to crush the pills against the counter. The powder scattered slightly, and she carefully swept it into a neat pile before brushing it into my coffee mug. She stirred it with the same spoon, 15-20 rotations, making sure it dissolved completely. Then she added cream and sugar exactly the way I liked it, and carried the mug toward my study. I took a screenshot, then another. Then I saved the entire video to my encrypted cloud storage. Got you. Over the next 6 days, I collected 7 videos, each one identical. Each morning between 6:45 and 7, Genevieve would prepare my coffee crush. The pills, stir them and add cream and sugar. The ritual was so practiced, so automatic, that she never once looked around or seemed concerned about being observed. On December 24th, I copied all 7 videos to an encrypted external drive. I made 3 copies, one for myself, one for Gerald Paxton, one for Warren Blackwell. Then I uploaded everything to a secure cloud server with instructions to release the files to law enforcement if I didn't check in every 72 hours. Meanwhile, Genevieve's campaign to get me into a nursing home reached its peak. On the 21st, she told Dominic I'd left the stove on with nothing in the pan, a complete fabrication. I'd been in my workshop all afternoon, nowhere near the kitchen. But Dominic found a pan on the stove when he came home, still warm, and I could see the fear in his eyes. "Dad, you could have burned the house down," he said gently. I played my part. "I don't remember turning it on." "I'm sorry, son. I'm so sorry." That night, I heard Genevieve talking to him in their room, her voice pitched perfectly between concern and pragmatism. "We need to be realistic about your father's safety. There are excellent memory care facilities in Ann Arbor, I've researched them. Places where he'd have 24-hour supervision activities designed for cognitive decline professionals who understand what he's going through." "Shut. It feels like giving up on him," Dominic said, his voice thick. "It's not giving up. It's getting him proper care." A pause. "And honestly, this house is too much for him to maintain anyway. If we sold it, the equity could cover years of facility care. The market's strong right now. We could probably get $3 million for it." There it was. $3 million. That was her real goal. Not just the patent royalties or the wine collection. She wanted everything. The next afternoon, I walked next door to see Norman Webb. He was raking leaves in his front yard, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who'd learned to pace himself. "Norman, I need to ask you something," I said. "If anything happens to me, if I end up in a nursing home or if I die suddenly, I need you to tell the police that Genevieve poisoned me." He stopped raking and looked at me steadily. "You're serious?" "Completely. I have evidence, but I need people who'll speak up if she tries to make me disappear." "You have my word, Elliot." That evening, I set my trap. I announced at dinner that I had a doctor's appointment on December 26th, a follow-up for my blood pressure. I said nothing urgent, but necessary. The appointment was at 10 in the morning and would probably take a few hours. I saw Genevieve's expression sharpen with interest. "I'll come with you," she offered immediately. "Yeah, that's kind, but not necessary. It's just routine blood work and a consultation. Boring stuff. Are you sure you should drive yourself, given the memory issues?" "I'll be fine. The medical center is only 15 minutes away. December 26th. I made sure my phone's location sharing was enabled. Genevieve had installed a family tracking app weeks ago, supposedly for safety. She'd be able to see exactly where I was. She'd watch me drive to the University of Michigan Medical Center and know I'd be gone for hours. That's when she'd make her move on the wine cellar. Everything was ready. The biometric lock would record every attempted entry. The cameras throughout the house would capture everything. Gerald Paxton had the evidence. Warren Blackwell had the legal documentation. Dr. Martinez had my medical records proving the poisoning. The police were waiting for my call. Christmas morning arrived with the kind of silence that makes you aware of every absence. Dominic had set up the small tree in the living room the night before, something we'd done together every year since he was a child. But this year felt different. The ornaments were generic store-bought. Rosalind's handmade glass angels and her meticulous way of arranging the lights were gone, and the emptiness of that tradition hollowed out the room. Genevieve moved through the house in a festive red sweater, her performance as the devoted daughter-in-law flawless. She poured coffee, set out pastries, smiled at just the right moments. If I hadn't known what she was, I might have believed it myself. We exchanged gifts after breakfast. Dominic handed me a carefully wrapped box containing a wine aerator, one of those elegant glass devices designed to let a wine breathe properly before you taste it. "For when you're ready to start enjoying the collection again, Dad," he said quietly. "When things feel normal." The thoughtfulness of it, the quiet hope in his voice nearly broke me. He still believed we could return to the life we'd had before. He didn't know how close we'd come to losing everything. Genevieve's gift came next, wrapped in expensive paper with a gold ribbon. Inside was a sleek box of premium cognitive enhancement supplements, with bold claims printed on the label: memory improvement, mental clarity, brain health optimization. "I've been researching natural remedies," she said, her voice sweet and concerned. "These have excellent reviews for supporting cognitive function. I thought they might help." The irony was staggering. She was poisoning me with benzodiazepines and antipsychotics while presenting supplements as a gift. The performance was so perfect it was almost admirable. Almost. "Hi, that's very thoughtful," I said, setting the box aside. "Thank you." Around noon, there was a soft knock at my study door. I opened it to find Norman Webb standing on the front porch, his expression serious and uncomfortable. "Elliot, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Privately." We stepped outside into the cold December air, and he lowered his voice immediately, glancing back toward my house, as if worried someone might overhear. "Last night around midnight, I let Cooper out for his evening walk. I saw someone in your backyard. It was Genevieve. She was using a flashlight to examine your basement windows, the ones that face the back of the property near the fence line. She spent a good 10 minutes down there crouching, looking through the glass, like she was trying to see inside or maybe measuring something." My blood ran cold. "Which window exactly?" "The corner one, the small one near where I think your wine cellar is. Looked like she was figuring out if she could fit through it." "Thank you, Norman." I gripped his shoulder. "I mean it. Thank you." The moment he left, I went straight down to the basement. The window Norman had described was indeed small, maybe 2 feet wide by 18 inches tall, but just large enough for someone determined and flexible to squeeze through if they shattered the glass. It was the one vulnerable entry point. I hadn't fully secured the single flaw in my defenses. I spent the next hour installing heavy-duty security bars from the inside, the kind designed to withstand sledgehammers and couldn't be removed without power tools and considerable time. My hands ached by the time I finished, but when I tested the bars, they held firm. That window was now as impenetrable as the biometric lock on the cellar door itself. There was only one way into the wine cellar now through the main entrance, and breaking that lock would leave unmistakable, undeniable evidence of forced entry. That night, sleep was impossible. Around 3 in the morning, I heard Genevieve's voice drifting up from downstairs, quiet but distinct, with the careful tone people use when they believe everyone else is asleep. I crept to the top of the staircase and stood in the darkness listening. Tomorrow morning, yes. He'll be gone for at least 3 hours. I'll finally be able to get inside and photograph everything. The patent documentation, the licensing agreements, the portfolio statements, all of it. The documents alone are worth millions, and once we have proof of the full asset base, we can move forward. You have the papers ready on your end. Good. Once I have photographic proof of the assets, we can move forward with the involuntary commitment proceedings. She was coordinating with someone, an accomplice, likely the same person who'd helped her forge documents in Ohio and Texas, in all the other cases Gerald had uncovered. I felt a surge of alarm, but forced myself to breathe and think clearly. It didn't matter who else was involved or what papers they had ready. The video evidence of her poisoning me was concrete, time-stamped, and undeniable. Whatever scheme she was planning would collapse the moment that footage reached the police. I retreated silently to my study and locked the door. At 4 in the morning, I went down to the wine cellar one last time before everything changed. I stood among the bottles in the 55-degree air, the temperature held perfectly stable by the system I'd designed myself. I reached out and touched the 2005 Napa Cabernet, one of the last bottles Rosalind and I had chosen together. Rosalind. I whispered into the stillness, tomorrow she pays for what she's done. Tomorrow this ends. I could almost feel her response. The way she would have squeezed my hand, told me to be careful, to be smart, to remember that I was stronger and more capable than I gave myself credit for. I locked the cellar door behind me and returned upstairs to wait. At 8 o'clock on December 26th, I woke to the smell of coffee drifting through the house. Genevieve was already in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. When I appeared in the doorway, she turned with that familiar, practiced smile and held out the chipped mug, Rosalind's mug. "Good morning," she said brightly. "I made your coffee extra strong today. You'll want to be alert for your doctor's appointment." I looked at the cup in her hands and thought about the 7 videos stored on my encrypted drive, each one showing her crushing pills into this exact mug. I thought about Dr. Morrison in Ohio, dead at 61 after 6 months in a nursing home. His son Patrick left grieving and financially devastated. $3.2 million stolen through forged documents and manufactured dementia. "Thank you," I said, accepting the mug with steady hands. Her eyes followed me as I walked toward the bathroom. I could feel her watching, waiting to confirm I would drink it, that the routine would continue uninterrupted. I closed the bathroom door, locked it, and poured the entire contents into the toilet. I watched the brown liquid swirl away, taking with it her latest attempt to cloud my mind and steal my future. "Not today," I whispered to my reflection in the mirror. "Never again." When I emerged, Genevieve was waiting in the hallway, her posture casual but her eyes sharp and alert. "Did you drink your coffee?" she asked, her voice light but with an edge of something harder beneath it. "Every drop, Uncounter," I lied smoothly. "Delicious as always." Her smile returned, but I saw the calculation behind it. She believed she'd won. She had no idea the trap was already set. If you're still watching, drop a comment sharing what you think happens next. Will Elliot's trap work? Let me know you're here with me. Quick reminder, this story contains fictionalized elements exploring real themes. If this isn't for you, feel free to stop here. Otherwise, let's continue. December 26th, 9:47 in the morning. I kissed Dominic goodbye. At the front door, told him I'd be back before lunch, and walked to my car with the careful, slightly shuffling movements of someone who might easily get confused on the way to a simple medical appointment. Genevieve watched from the kitchen window. I could feel her eyes tracking me intently as I backed slowly out of the driveway, performing the role she expected to see. I drove exactly 3 blocks, turned onto a quiet side street, lined with mature trees, and parked behind a neighbor's tall hedge where my car would be completely invisible from our house. Then I opened the camera app on my phone with hands that were steadier than they'd been in months, and pulled up the wine cellar feed. And I waited, watching the empty screen, knowing she'd make her move soon. The adrenaline was already building in my system, my engineer's mind cataloging every detail, preparing for what was about to happen. This was it, the moment I'd been planning for, the trap I'd carefully set. Everything depended on her, following the pattern, on her greed and impatience overriding her caution. At 10:03, movement flickered on the screen. Genevieve descended the basement stairs, moving with purposeful confidence now that she believed she was completely alone. She paused at the bottom, head tilted, listening intently for any sound that might indicate I'd returned unexpectedly, or that Dominic hadn't actually left for work. Then she pulled out her phone, checking my location on the family tracking app, I realized, confirming I was still at the medical center, where I'd driven earlier specifically to establish my presence there. Satisfied that the house was truly empty, she approached the wine cellar door with visible anticipation. At 10:08, she made a phone call. The camera's audio wasn't perfect from that angle, but I could read her lips well enough to understand. "He's gone. I'm going in now. Be ready with the paperwork." She ended the call and reached into her expensive designer purse, the same one she'd carried the prescription pills in every morning. Out came a heavy-duty screwdriver and a small but professional-quality crowbar, tools she'd clearly purchased and prepared well in advance, hidden and waiting for exactly this opportunity. At 10:12, she attacked the biometric lock. The first strike of the crowbar against the steel housing made me flinch involuntarily, even though I was 3 blocks away, watching on a screen barely 4 inches wide. The impact was violent and deliberate. The plastic outer casing cracked audibly. She wedged the crowbar deeper into the gap she'd created, prying and twisting with surprising strength. Sparks flew dramatically as wires tore loose from their connections. With a final violent wrench that showed both determination and rage, she ripped the entire locking mechanism from the wall, leaving a jagged hole and dangling wires sparking occasionally. The door swung open and she stepped inside my sanctuary. She moved through my carefully organized wine cellar like she owned it, like she'd already inherited everything past the Napa Cabernets and Oregon Pinots I'd collected with Rosalind over decades, heading straight for the back corner with purpose. The 1982 Bordeaux section, the oldest, most valuable bottles in the entire collection. She knew exactly where to go. No hesitation, no searching. She pulled aside the 1982 Chateau Petrus, a bottle worth nearly $5,000 that I'd been saving for Dominic's wedding, and reached confidently behind the wine rack. The hidden compartment I'd installed years ago, the one even Dominic didn't know existed, opened easily under her practiced hands. How did she know it was there? Had she somehow gotten blueprints of the house, bribed a contractor? The question gnawed at me, but I pushed it aside. There would be time for those answers later. I watched, my jaw clenched, as she pulled out thick file folders, my complete patent documentation, detailed licensing agreements with 4 separate manufacturers, comprehensive investment portfolio statements showing every account and asset. Everything I'd protected for decades, everything she'd been hunting and manipulating for months. She spread them across the tasting table with casual disregard for their importance, and started photographing each page systematically with her phone, working methodically, making absolutely certain she captured every detail, every number, every signature. At 10:22, I called Detective Sarah Reeves on the direct number she'd given me. "She's in my wine cellar right now," I said quietly, keeping my voice steady and professional. Breaking and entering, destroying secured property, stealing confidential business documents. I'm 3 blocks away watching everything on security cameras. Multiple cameras, multiple angles, all recording. Don't approach the house under any circumstances, Reeves said immediately, her voice sharp with command. We're on our way. ETA 4 minutes. I'm calling my son next. He needs to see this with his own eyes. At 10:23, I called Dominic at his civil engineering office downtown. Son, you need to come home right now. Immediately. Genevieve is breaking into my wine cellar. What, Dad? That doesn't make any sense. She ripped the biometric lock off the wall with a crowbar. Right now, at this exact moment, she's photographing my patent documents, my investment accounts, everything. Just come home. Please. You need to see this. I heard the shock in his silence, the struggle to process what I was telling him. Then his voice came back strained. I'm leaving right now. 5 minutes. At 10:25, I heard the sirens approaching from 2 different directions. I got out of my car and walked quickly back toward the house, my heart pounding, but my mind clear. 2 patrol cars pulled up simultaneously just as I reached the driveway, and Detective Reeves emerged from an unmarked sedan close behind them, 3 uniformed officers flanking her. Mr. Brennan, she said, her expression all business. Show us exactly what we're dealing with. I led them through the front door I'd deliberately left unlocked, down the basement stairs we'd walked together so many times as a family. The wine cellar door hung open like a wound, the destroyed biometric lock scattered in pieces on the floor wires, still sparking intermittently. Inside, Genevieve stood frozen at the tasting table, surrounded by my scattered documents. Like evidence at a crime scene, her phone still held up in her hand, mid-photograph, caught absolutely red-handed. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession: initial shock at seeing me, quick calculation of possible excuses, then a desperate attempt at innocence that was almost insulting in its transparency. I had permission. She stammered, her voice higher than usual. Elliot told me I could come down here. He's been so confused lately. Maybe he forgot he asked me to organize these papers. I never gave you permission. I said, my voice cold and absolutely clear, letting steel show for the first time. I never gave you permission to break my biometric lock with a crowbar, to destroy my property, or to photograph confidential business documents worth millions of dollars. I specifically and repeatedly denied you access to this room. Detective Reeves stepped forward, her hand resting meaningfully on her badge. Ma'am, I need you to put the phone down immediately and step away from those documents. Dominic appeared in the doorway at that exact moment, breathless from running his tie askew. He stared at the scene before him. His wife surrounded by police officers, the destroyed and sparking lock, the scattered confidential files. My face calm and certain in a way it hadn't been in months. Jen, he said weakly, confusion and dawning horror in his voice. What's happening? What are you doing? She turned to him instantly, tears springing to her eyes with practiced ease that I'd seen 100 times. Dominic, honey, I was just trying to help organize your father's important paperwork. He asked me to help him. He's been so overwhelmed. I never asked you anything, I interrupted firmly. Juanito, I specifically and repeatedly refused to give you access to this room. That's precisely why I installed a fingerprint lock that only I could open. That's exactly why you had to break it with tools you brought specifically for that purpose. Detective Reeves surveyed the extensive damage carefully. Mr. Brennan, is this the only crime you're reporting today? Just the breaking and entering? I looked directly at Genevieve, watched the carefully constructed mask starting to crack, watched real fear beginning to show in her eyes beneath the fake tears. Then I looked at Dominic standing in the doorway of my violated sanctuary, his entire world visibly cracking apart before his eyes. "No, detective," I said quietly but firmly. "This is just the beginning. I need to show you something upstairs. Video evidence of a much more serious crime. Multiple crimes, actually." Genevieve's face went pale, all color draining away. "What video?" she whispered, the tears stopping instantly. I held her gaze steadily, letting her see that I knew everything. 7 consecutive days of you systematically poisoning my coffee. Every single morning, crushing prescription pills into my cup. All of it recorded in high definition from multiple angles. Time-stamped, dated, stored securely in multiple locations. The tears stopped completely. The performance ended like a switch had been thrown. For just a moment, I saw the real woman beneath all the carefully constructed layers, cold, calculating, and absolutely cornered, with no escape route remaining. It was time for the curtain to fall. Upstairs in the kitchen, I pulled out my phone and held it up so Detective Reeves could see the screen. "Detective," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me, "I want to report attempted murder." I connected my phone to the living room television using the cable I'd prepared earlier. The screen flickered to life, and suddenly the December 18th video filled the entire wall, high-definition timestamp, clearly visible in the corner, audio crystal clear. Genevieve appeared on screen, moving through my kitchen in her robe at exactly 6:47 in the morning. We all watched in complete silence as she started the coffee maker with practiced ease, pulled down the chipped mug from its usual spot, then reached into her designer purse for a small prescription bottle. The crushing sound was audible even through the TV speakers, the distinctive scrape of the back of the spoon grinding pills against the granite countertop, reducing them to fine powder. Dominic made a noise I'd never heard before, something between a gasp and a scream, raw and broken. "No!" he whispered, his voice cracking. "That can't be. Jen, tell them that's not what it looks like. Tell them there's an explanation." But Genevieve said nothing. She just stared at the screen, her face completely blank, like she was watching a stranger rather than herself committing a crime. I played the second video without comment. December 19th, 6:48 a.m. Same routine, same methodical crushing of pills, same careful stirring to ensure complete dissolution, same addition of cream and sugar to mask any taste. "Stop!" Dominic said, his voice breaking completely. "Dad, please stop. I can't watch this." But I played the third video anyway, then the fourth, then the fifth, sixth, and seventh. Each one identical, same time, same method, same deliberate poisoning. By the time the seventh video finished, Dominic had sunk onto the couch, his head buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I paused the playback and walked to my study, returning with a thick folder I'd prepared. "Detective Reeves, these are comprehensive toxicology reports from Dr. Gloria Martinez at the University of Michigan Medical Center, dated from 2 weeks ago. They show dangerously high levels of lorazepam, that's a benzodiazepine sedative commonly prescribed for anxiety, and quetiapine, which is an antipsychotic medication, in my bloodstream." I handed her the documents, which she immediately began examining with intense focus. "Neither drug was ever prescribed to me by any physician. I have no legitimate medical need for either medication. But when taken regularly by someone who doesn't require them, they produce symptoms that perfectly mimic dementia and cognitive decline. Severe memory loss, confusion, disorientation, difficulty with basic tasks." The symptoms gave her the justification she needed to suggest nursing home placement. Detective Reeves studied the reports carefully, her expression hardening with each page. "And once you were institutionalized in a memory care facility, she'd have medical power of attorney through my son," I explained, gesturing to Dominic's hunched form on the couch. She could make all decisions about my care, my medical treatment, my assets, everything. And based on the pattern I'm about to show you, I pulled out Gerald Paxton's investigation file. I wouldn't have survived very long in that facility. I opened the file to the detailed section on Dr. James Morrison. 18 months ago in Columbus, Ohio, Dr. James Morrison, a healthy 61-year-old cardiologist with an impeccable reputation. She used the name Elena Foster, at that time married his son Patrick Morrison, after a whirlwind 4-month courtship. 3 weeks after moving into the family home, Dr. Morrison suddenly started experiencing severe and rapid cognitive decline. Within 6 months, he was dead in a memory care facility. Genevieve inherited $3.2 million through Patrick. "How did Dr. Morrison die?" Detective Reeves asked, her voice tight. The official cause of death was listed as dementia-related complications, aspiration pneumonia specifically. But one of his colleagues at the hospital, someone who'd known him for 20 years, thought the decline was suspiciously rapid and pushed for additional toxicology testing after the cremation, but before the ashes were scattered. They found traces of the exact same drugs in his system that are currently in mine, lorazepam and quetiapine. I laid out the photographs and documentation Gerald had compiled: Houston, Dallas, Columbus, different names for each case, but the same methodical pattern. Her real name is Genevieve Volkov, 28 years old, originally from somewhere in Eastern Europe based on the few records we could find. This is what she does professionally. She targets young professional men with wealthy aging parents. She marries them quickly, moves into the family home, and systematically poisons the parent, while carefully positioning herself to inherit everything. The drugs make the victim appear to have dementia, which justifies nursing home placement and gives her access to medical and financial power of attorney. Detective Reeves was already on her phone, her voice sharp and urgent. "I need a full forensics unit at this address immediately. Priority response. And get me a direct line to Columbus PD Homicide Division. We need to reopen the James Morrison case with new evidence of homicide." She turned back to Genevieve, who stood flanked by 2 uniformed officers, her earlier composure completely shattered. The mask had cracked, and underneath was something much uglier. "Shut, those videos are fake," Genevieve said, but her voice lacked any conviction. "He's been confused, paranoid for months. This is all because he doesn't want to admit he needs professional help. He's manufacturing evidence. The blood tests don't lie, Miss Volkov." Detective Reeves cut her off sharply. "The videos are digitally time-stamped and verified. The pattern of criminal behavior across multiple states is thoroughly documented, and Mr. Brennan seems remarkably lucid and coherent for someone you've been publicly claiming has advanced dementia." "They're vitamins," Genevieve tried desperately, her voice rising. "Brain supplements, cognitive enhancers. I was trying to help him, trying to improve his memory." "Ma'am, I need you to stop talking immediately." Detective Reeves pulled handcuffs from her belt with practiced efficiency. "Genevieve Volkov, you are under arrest for attempted murder in the first degree, aggravated elder abuse, breaking and entering with intent to commit larceny, and theft of confidential business documents. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The Miranda rights felt surreal, echoing through my living room, like dialogue from a television crime drama. But this wasn't fiction. This was real. This was actually happening in my home. As the officers began to lead Genevieve toward the front door, she suddenly stopped and turned back to look directly at me. Her expression had changed completely. No more tears, no more desperate innocence, no more pretense of being the concerned daughter-in-law, just cold, calculating rage and something else I couldn't quite identify. She smiled slowly. It was the most genuinely chilling thing I'd ever seen, that smile, sharp and knowing, and utterly devoid of any humanity or remorse. "You think this is over?" she said quietly, but her voice carried clearly across the room. "You think you've actually won?" Something in her tone and the absolute confidence behind those words made my blood run cold. "What does that mean?" I demanded, but she just kept smiling that terrible smile as the officers firmly pulled her through the doorway and out to the waiting patrol car. I could hear her laugh, that same cold, brittle sound, as they guided her down the front walk. Detective Reeves was immediately organizing evidence bags, calling in additional investigative units, coordinating directly with Ohio authorities. Dominic remained on the couch in complete shock, staring at nothing, his face pale and drawn. The house rapidly filled with investigators, forensic technicians, evidence photographers, but all I could hear echoing in my mind was Genevieve's voice. "You think this is over?" What had I missed? What piece of her elaborate plan was still in motion? What contingency had she prepared for the possibility of getting caught? Walked to the front window and watched the patrol car pull slowly away from the curb, Genevieve's silhouette clearly visible in the back seat, still and calm. And for the first time since this entire nightmare had begun, I felt a new and different kind of fear. Not the fear of being poisoned or losing my mind, but the fear that catching her, exposing her, having her arrested wasn't actually the end of this story. It was just the beginning of something potentially much worse. Thank you for staying through that intense moment. Comment below, were you shocked by the video evidence or did you predict it? Share your reaction. Note this narrative includes fictional dramatization of serious issues. You can stop here if preferred, but there's one more twist coming. "There's someone else, isn't there?" I asked. Genevieve's smile widened. Even handcuffed, flanked by officers, she looked almost pleased, like I'd finally asked the right question. "You think I could do all this alone?" she said. "The legal paperwork, the asset transfers, making everything look legitimate. I'm good, Elliot. But I'm not that good." Detective Reeves stepped closer. "Who's your partner?" For a long moment, Genevieve said nothing. Then she laughed, a cold, brittle sound that made my skin crawl. "His name is Victor Kane, estate planning attorney in Detroit. He specializes in, let's call it creative legal work, forging powers of attorney, falsifying documents, creating paper trails that make asset transfers look completely above board." "How does it work?" Reeves asked. "Simple, really." Genevieve's voice was almost conversational now, like she was describing a business model rather than a criminal conspiracy. I get the target into a nursing home, dementia, cognitive decline, whatever diagnosis fits. Once they're institutionalized, Victor files the paperwork. Medical powers of attorney, updated wills, trust modifications. Everything signed and notarized, all perfectly legal looking. By the time anyone questions it, the assets are already transferred, and the victim is either dead or too impaired to testify. My hands clenched into fists. "Dr. Morrison?" "Ah, yes. James." She said his name like they'd been friends. "He lasted 6 months in that Columbus facility. Fought harder than I expected. But with Elliot," she looked directly at me, "I figured 4 months, maybe less. This wine cellar alone is worth over $200,000. The patent royalties, the investment portfolio, the house equity. Everything would have been so much faster with you." Dominic made a strangled sound beside me. "How many?" Detective Reeves demanded. "How many people have you done this to?" "Successfully 3 before Elliot. Houston, Dallas, Columbus. Victor handled the legal side for all of them. We split the proceeds 60-40 my favor since I do the hard work." She smiled. $4.7 million currently sitting in accounts across the Cayman Islands. Not bad for 3 years of work. I felt sick. $4.7 million. That represented real lives, people who'd trusted her families, who'd been devastated children, who'd lost parents. 7 victims? I said quietly, the pieces finally clicking together. Houston and Dallas, there were 2 cases in each city. 7 people total. Very good, Elliot. I knew you were sharp, even with the drugs clouding your mind. Detective Reeves was already on her phone. I need Detroit PD to pick up Victor Kane immediately. A state attorney likely has an office downtown. Consider him armed and dangerous. He's an accessory to attempted murder and possibly actual murder in Columbus, Ohio. She turned back to Genevieve. You're going to tell us everything. Every victim, every dollar, every forged document. Because right now, you're looking at multiple life sentences. I want a lawyer, Genevieve said, the conversational tone evaporating. You'll get one. But Kane's already talking, Ms. Volkov. He's going to cut a deal, testify against you, and walk away with a fraction of what you're facing. Unless you start cooperating right now. Genevieve's expression flickered, the first real fear I'd seen in her eyes since the arrest. Within 20 minutes, we got word that Detroit police had arrested Victor Kane at his office in the Renaissance Center. When they'd executed the search warrant, they'd found a file cabinet full of forged documents, powers of attorney, with signatures that didn't match handwriting samples, wills with suspicious notarizations, trust amendments backdated to make them appear legitimate. All with different names, but the same methodical pattern. Mr. Kane's attorney is already negotiating, Detective Reeves told us, reading from her phone. He's offering to testify against Volkov in exchange for reduced charges, 5 to 10 years instead of life. He'll tell them everything, she said with grim satisfaction, looking at Genevieve. Every case, every victim, every dollar transferred. You just gave us enough to put you away for life, Ms. Volkov. Norman Webb arrived as additional officers were documenting the scene and cataloging evidence from the wine cellar. He pulled me aside on the front porch, away from the chaos inside. Elliot, I need to tell the detective something, he said, his voice low. About 3 weeks ago, I was walking Cooper late at night around 11, and I saw a man in an expensive suit talking to Genevieve in her car. They were parked 2 streets over, like they didn't want anyone from this neighborhood to see them. The man looked angry, kept gesturing at her. I didn't think much of it at the time, figured maybe it was work-related, but that was probably Victor Kane, I said, my mind racing. Planning how to steal everything once they got me committed. Or maybe they were arguing about the timeline. I'd just installed the biometric lock, which slowed her down. Norman's expression darkened with anger. I should have said something earlier. Should have mentioned it to you, at least. You're saying it now, I assured him. And that places Kane here in Ann Arbor, meeting with her secretly. That's evidence of conspiracy. You might need to give a statement to the detective. Whatever you need, Norman said firmly. That woman almost killed you, Elliot. I'll testify at every trial if that's what it takes. I walked back to the driveway and stood next to Dominic, watching as the patrol car carrying Genevieve pulled away from the curb. The woman who'd systematically poisoned me for months, who'd planned to steal everything I'd built over 40 years, who'd killed at least one person before me, and possibly more. She was finally gone. Shook 7 victims. I said quietly, more to myself than to Dominic, trying to process the magnitude of what we'd uncovered. $4.7 million stolen over 3 years. 1 person definitely dead, Dr. Morrison in Ohio. Maybe more we don't know about yet. And I almost became the 2nd confirmed murder. I put my arm around my son's shoulders. He was shaking, his whole body trembling with the shock of everything that had been revealed in the past 2 hours. It's over, son, I said, pulling him closer. She's gone. She can't hurt us anymore. She can't hurt anyone anymore. Dominic looked at me, his eyes red from tears he was trying not to shed. Is it really over, Dad? Will she actually pay for what she did? Or will she find some way to manipulate the system, like she manipulated everything else. I watched the patrol car disappear around the corner, Genevieve's silhouette visible through the rear window. Detective Reeves is coordinating with Ohio authorities right now, I said. If they can prove she murdered Dr. Morrison and with Kane's testimony, the pattern we've documented, the forged documents, and the toxicology evidence that matches what they found in my system, I believe they can. She'll be charged with first-degree murder in addition to everything else. What does that mean for her sentence? It means if they convict her in Ohio, she'll never see sunlight again. Not as a free woman. I took a deep breath. The attempted murder charges here in Michigan, the elder abuse, the fraud, the breaking and entering, the conspiracy with Kane, all of that combined with a murder conviction in Ohio. I shook my head. She's going to prison for the rest of her life. 25 to life in Michigan alone, possibly more if Ohio gets a conviction. She'll die in prison, Dominic. She'll never have the chance to do this to anyone else. For the first time in months, since before Genevieve had entered our lives, I felt like I could actually breathe deeply, without the weight of fear and suspicion crushing my chest. The nightmare was over. Justice was coming. And we had survived. The house felt unnaturally quiet after the police left. Detective Reeves had taken Genevieve away in handcuffs. The forensics team had photographed everything, and now it was just the two of us, me and Dominic, father and son, surrounded by 3 months of lies that needed to be untangled. Dominic sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. He hadn't spoken since the police car disappeared down the street. I could see his shoulders shaking. I made tea, real tea, not coffee, never coffee again, and set a cup in front of him. "Dad," he said finally, his voice breaking. "I brought her into your home. I married her. I let her poison you for months. I almost killed you." "You didn't know," I said quietly. She was a professional dom. She'd done this before. She knew exactly how to play the role. But I should have seen it. The way she asked about money, about the house. The way she pushed you toward that nursing home. She targeted you specifically. Gerald's investigation proved that. She researched us, engineered that meeting in Chicago. Everything was calculated to get close to you, so she could get close to my assets. He looked up at me, his eyes red. Why the wine cellar? Why was she so obsessed with getting in there? I took a breath. "It's not just wine. Come with me." We walked down to the basement. The wine cellar door hung damaged, the biometric lock destroyed, but inside everything remained intact. The hidden compartment behind the 1982 Bordeaux section still stood open where forensics had documented it. "What is all this?" Dominic asked, staring at the file folders. $31,500, I said. "That's what I receive every month from the HVAC valve patent. It's been 5.5 years. I have 12 more years remaining. The lifetime total will be approximately $4.5 million. Dominic stared. $4.5 million. The house is worth about $1.5 million. My investment portfolio is around $1.1 million. Total net worth approximately $3.1 million. I gestured to the folders. That's what she was after. That's why she married you. That's why she poisoned me. I had no idea. Your mother and I made that decision together years ago. We didn't want you to grow up knowing about the money. We wanted you to build your own life, your own character, based on who you are, not what you might inherit. So you kept it secret. We planned to tell you when you got married. Really married to someone genuine. Someone who loved you for who you are. I smiled sadly. Your mother even wrote you a letter about it. It's in my desk upstairs, sealed, waiting for the right moment. She knew before she died. She knew. She helped me set up everything. She died before the patent was granted, but she knew what it would mean for your future. And Genevieve figured it out. Patent records are public. She looked, she found it, and she built an entire identity around getting access through you. Dominic walked to the wine racks. Dr. Morrison in Ohio. She did the same thing to him. Yes. And at least 5 others. 7 confirmed victims. She and Victor Kane had perfected this pattern. I almost made you victim number 8. No. I put my hands on his shoulders. You didn't do this. She did. You were manipulated. You were a victim too. That's what predators do. They exploit trust and kindness. What do we do now? Now we rebuild. We heal. I walked to the 1982 Bordeaux section and carefully removed one bottle of Chateau Pétrus, 44 years old. Your mother and I bought this the year you were born. We decided that night we'd open it at your wedding. Your real wedding. To someone who deserved you. I held the bottle up to the light. Genevieve will never touch this. This is for your future, for the life you're going to build, for the person you're going to find when you're ready to trust again. I don't know if I can. You will. It'll take time, but you will. Because the alternative is letting her win. Letting her steal not just money, but your entire future. Your ability to love and trust. And I won't let that happen. How can you be sure? Because you're Rosalind's son, and she never let anything defeat her, not even cancer. She fought for 16 months when they said she had 12. She fought because she wanted more time with you. She didn't let the disease steal that from her. You won't let Genevieve steal your future. We stood together in the wine cellar surrounded by bottles and memories and the documents that had nearly cost me my life. Come on, I said finally. Let's go upstairs. We both need rest. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time in months, without poison in my bloodstream. Down the hall, I could hear Dominic in his old room. We had survived. Both of us. Together. The road ahead would be long. There would be trials in Michigan and Ohio. There would be months of legal proceedings. But we had the truth. We had evidence. We had each other. I closed my eyes and thought of Rosalind, of her strength, of the way she'd planned for this future. We did it, Ross, I whispered. We protected him. We protected everything we built together. Somewhere down the hall, Dominic's light clicked off. The house settled into silence. Real silence. Safe silence. For the first time in months, I slept without nightmares. 3 months. That's how long it takes for the legal system to begin processing a case like ours. 3 months of depositions, grand jury hearings, evidence review, and headline after headline in the local news. Local woman charged in poisoning scheme. Elder abuse case linked to multi-state pattern. Detroit attorney arrested as accomplice in inheritance fraud. January brought the grand jury indictments. In Michigan, Genevieve Volkoff was formally charged with attempted murder in the first-degree aggravated elder abuse, breaking and entering with intent to commit larceny, theft of confidential business documents, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The prosecution requested a sentence range of 25 years to life. In Ohio, the case was even more serious. Based on Gerald Paxton's investigation and the pattern evidence from Michigan, Texas, and other states, the Columbus District Attorney reopened Dr. James Morrison's death and filed first-degree murder charges with aggravating circumstances, specifically murder for financial gain and murder of a victim over 65 years old. If convicted, Genevieve faced life in prison without the possibility of parole. Victor Kane, the estate planning attorney from Detroit, who had helped her forge documents and file fraudulent paperwork across multiple jurisdictions, accepted a plea deal in late January. In exchange for his full cooperation and testimony against Genevieve in both Michigan and Ohio, he would receive a sentence of 5 to 10 years for conspiracy to commit fraud, with credit for time served and the possibility of parole after 3 years. Kane's records were devastatingly thorough. He had kept detailed files on every case dates, victim names, amounts, transferred methods used. The prosecutors called his documentation a roadmap to convict Genevieve Volkoff of the most sophisticated elder abuse scheme in Michigan history. The evidence was overwhelming. 7 confirmed victims across 4 states. $4.7 million stolen over a 3-year period. The money was currently frozen in offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, divided 60-40 in Genevieve's favor. Kane had been the inside man, the legal expert who made everything look legitimate, while the victims were either dying or too cognitively impaired to fight back. My own recovery had been slow but steady. Dr. Gloria Martinez monitored my health through weekly appointments in January and February. The toxicology reports had shown dangerously high levels of lorazepam and quetiapine in my system drugs that, when taken regularly over months, can cause symptoms identical to progressive dementia. Memory loss, confusion, disorientation, mood changes. "Your liver took a beating," Dr. Martinez told me during one appointment. "The stress markers were elevated and we're seeing some inflammation, but your cognitive function has recovered completely. There's no permanent neurological damage. You were incredibly lucky." Lucky. That's what she called it. I called it 7 videos and a smoke detector camera. The PTSD diagnosis came in February. Dr. Martinez referred me to a trauma specialist after I mentioned the hypervigilance. The difficulty sleeping, the way I couldn't walk into my own kitchen without checking every surface, every cup, every container for signs of tampering. "You were being systematically poisoned by someone you trusted in your own home for months," the specialist explained. "Your body and mind went through sustained trauma. Healing from that takes time." I couldn't drink coffee. Even the smell of it made my stomach turn. I'd switched to tea, and even that took weeks before I could consume it without analyzing every step of the preparation. But my mind was clear. That was what mattered. I could think. I could remember. I could plan and analyze and function without the chemical fog that had been slowly killing me. Dominic's healing was different. He started therapy in early January, working through the guilt and shame of having brought Genevieve into our lives. I could see the weight of it wearing on him, the constant replay of every moment, every red flag he thought he should have caught, every conversation where she'd manipulated him into trusting her. I keep thinking about the night she suggested selling the house. He told me one evening in late January. We were sitting in the living room, the house finally feeling like ours again. She said it so casually, like it was a practical solution. "Your father needs care, and the house is too big for him to manage alone. We could sell it, put him in a nice facility, use the proceeds for his care." And I actually considered it. I actually thought it made sense. "That's what she did," I reminded him gently. She made poison sound like medicine. She made theft sound like care. That was her skill. I still hate that I fell for it. You fell in love. That's different. In mid-February, I did something I'd been planning since the day Genevieve was arrested. I sat down with Dominic in my study and wrote him a check for $150,000. "Oh, what's this for?" he asked, staring at the amount. "A fresh start, a new beginning, whatever you need it to be." "Dad, I can't." "You can. You will. Use it to buy a house, start a business, travel, invest, I don't care. But use it to build something that's yours. Something she can't touch. Something that has nothing to do with her or this nightmare." He held the check like it might disappear. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll take care of yourself. Say you'll build a life that makes you happy. That's all your mother and I ever wanted." 3 weeks later, Dominic bought a small craftsman-style bungalow 4 blocks from my house. It had hardwood floors, a fireplace, a small backyard, and room for exactly one person to start over. He moved in on a Saturday in early March. I helped him carry boxes, set up furniture, hang pictures. It felt like watching him leave for college again, bittersweet, but necessary, a step toward independence and healing. "It's perfect," I told him as we stood in the empty living room, afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. "It's mine," he said quietly. "That's what makes it perfect." The following week, Dominic came by the house with a surprise, a dog. He'd adopted a rescue from the local shelter, a 3-year-old lab mix named Rusty, with one ear that stood straight up and one that flopped over and a tail that never stopped wagging. "I needed company," Dominic explained as Rusty explored the backyard, sniffing every corner with enthusiasm. "Someone who doesn't care about my past or my mistakes or what happened. Someone who just is. He's perfect. He has a vet appointment next week. I want to make sure he's healthy." Dominic watched Rusty chase a squirrel toward the fence. New house, new dog, new life. Maybe this is how you start over. The vet appointment turned into something unexpected. Dominic came by the following Thursday evening, and I could see something had shifted in his expression. Not quite happiness, he wasn't ready for that yet, but something lighter, something cautiously hopeful. "The vet was really nice," he said, trying to sound casual. "Her name's Dr. Hayes, Autumn Hayes. She spent 20 minutes with Rusty, checked everything, answered all my questions. She didn't rush. She actually seemed to care." "That's good." "She's from Portland, originally moved here about 2 years ago. She mentioned she's trying to save up to open her own practice someday, somewhere that focuses on rescue animals and low-income families who can't afford regular vet care." He paused. "She invited me to a dog park meetup on Saturday morning for rescue dog owners, to help them socialize." I looked at my son carefully. "And are you going?" "I don't know. It's too soon, isn't it? I can't trust my judgment anymore." What if she's exactly who she appears to be?" I interrupted gently. "Now, what if not every person is Genevieve? What if there are still good people in the world who do good things for good reasons? How do I know the difference?" "Time, patience, observation, and trusting that you're smarter now than you were 6 months ago." I smiled. "Besides, if Rusty likes her, that's a good sign. Dogs have excellent instincts about people." He laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in months. "So I should let my dog make my dating decisions. I've heard worse strategies." Saturday came. Dominic went to the dog park. He came back 2 hours later and told me Autumn had suggested they grab coffee sometime, if you're comfortable with that, no pressure, and talk about rescue dog training methods. "What did you say?" I asked. I said yes. Coffee, next week, just coffee. Good. She drives a paid-off Honda. She mentioned her student loan debt. She talked about grant applications and fundraising strategies for her clinic idea. She was real, normal, not performing. Just herself. Then go to coffee. See what happens. Take it slow. Don't let Genevieve steal your future, along with everything else she tried to take. That night, alone in my house with the lights off and the wine cellar locked securely below, I thought about the bottle of 1982 Chateau Petrus still waiting in its place. Not for Genevieve's shadow wedding, not for a con artist's performance. For someday. For when Dominic was ready. For when he found someone real. For the future, Rosalind and I had always imagined a future that had almost been stolen, but was still waiting, still possible, still worth fighting for. The legal battles would continue. The trials would come. justice would be served. But we had survived. And survival had become something more. It had become hope. 6 months after Genevieve's arrest, I hosted Sunday dinner. It sounds simple when I say it that way. Routine, ordinary. But 6 months ago, the dining room table in my house had been a stage where a predator performed and a victim slowly died. Tonight, it held something different, something I'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. Dominic arrived at 5:30 with Autumn Hayes and Rusty the dog. I'd met Autumn once before, briefly casually at a chance encounter at the hardware store, but this was the first time she'd been invited to my home. The first time Dominic had brought anyone to family dinner since Genevieve's arrest. The significance wasn't lost on either of us. Autumn carried a covered dish through the front door, smiling warmly. "I hope you like apple pie. It's my grandmother's recipe. I've been perfecting it for years." "I'm sure it's wonderful," I said, taking the dish and noting immediately how different this felt. Genevieve had brought expensive wine and designer desserts, calculated gifts meant to impress. Autumn had brought something homemade, imperfect, personal. Rusty bounded into the house, tail wagging, and immediately began investigating every corner of the living room. Autumn laughed and apologized. "He's still learning his manners. We're working on it." "He's fine. Let him explore." "Okay." I watched the dog sniff enthusiastically at the baseboards, the furniture, the corner where Genevieve's designer purse used to sit. Reclaiming the space in his own way, we worked together in the kitchen while Dominic set the table. Autumn helped chop vegetables for the salad, asking simple questions about cooking techniques and ingredient choices. She was comfortable in the kitchen, relaxed, not performing or trying to prove anything. When she spotted the photograph of Rosalind on the refrigerator, the one from our 20th wedding anniversary wine tasting in Napa, she paused. "That's your wife?" "Yes, Rosalind. She passed away 7 years ago." "She's beautiful." Autumn's voice was respectful, genuine. "Dominic mentioned you both loved wine. He said it was something you shared." It was. She had a better palate than I did. She could identify a wine's region just from the nose. I smiled at the memory. She used to say I collected the bottles, but she collected the stories behind them. That's a beautiful way to think about it. It was such a simple exchange, but it struck me how different it felt from Genevieve's carefully scripted concern, her practiced questions designed to extract information. Autumn was just talking, being present, acknowledging Rosalind's memory without trying to replace it or leverage it. Over dinner, we talked about Autumn's work at the veterinary clinic, Dominic's current engineering project, Rusty's progress in training classes. Normal conversation, easy and relaxed with natural pauses and genuine laughter. At one point, Autumn mentioned her student loan debt and her long-term plan to open a nonprofit clinic focused on rescue animals and low-income pet owners. I figure I've got another 5 years of saving before I can seriously start that process," she said matter-of-factly. "Between the loans and the startup costs, it's going to take time. But that's the dream." Genevieve had never mentioned financial struggle. She'd presented herself as successful, established, secure. Every detail of her life had been calibrated to signal wealth and stability. Autumn's transparency about her debt, her timeline, her realistic assessment of her future, it was refreshing in a way I hadn't expected. "That's an admirable goal," I said. "The city needs more resources for rescue animals." "I think so too. Rusty here is proof." She reached down to scratch behind the dog's ears. "He was on his 3rd family when Dom adopted him. Most people give up after the first behavioral issue. But with the right support and training, these animals are incredible companions." Dominic watched her with an expression I hadn't seen in months. Something lighter, softer, carefully hopeful. After dinner, I did something I hadn't done since Genevieve's arrest. I invited them down to the wine cellar. The space had been repaired. The biometric lock replaced with a simpler keyed deadbolt. The window bars remained. The hidden compartment behind the 1982 Bordeaux section had been resealed, the documents removed, and placed in a secure safety deposit box at my attorney's office. But the wine remained. 300 bottles carefully catalogued properly, stored at 55 degrees Fahrenheit, with 70% humidity. Autumn looked around with genuine interest. "This is incredible. How long did it take you to build this collection?" "About 15 years. Some bottles I bought on trips with Rosalind. Some I acquired from auctions or estate sales. Each one has a story." "Dom said you have wine from the year he was born. Several bottles, including one very special one we're saving for a future occasion." I glanced at Dominic, who understood immediately, but tonight calls for something different. I walked to a different section of the cellar, the Washington State wines, a smaller collection I'd been building more recently. I selected a 2012 Merlot from Walla Walla, a bottle Rosalind and I had purchased on our last trip together before her cancer diagnosis. This is the last bottle I bought with my wife," I said simply. "I think tonight is the right time to open it." Back upstairs, I taught Autumn the basics of wine tasting: how to observe the color, how to swirl and smell, how to let the wine breathe before that first sip. She was a quick learner, asking thoughtful questions, genuinely engaged. When we finally tasted the wine, I felt Rosalind's presence in the room as clearly as if she were standing beside me. "This is beautiful," Autumn said quietly. "Thank you for sharing it." I raised my glass. To Rosalind, who taught me that wine is about connection, not collection. To Dominic, who learned how to trust again. And to Autumn, who reminded us that kindness still exists in the world. We drank together in comfortable silence. Later, as we sat in the living room, with Rusty stretched out on the floor, Dominic mentioned the legal update he'd received earlier that week. "The sentencing hearing in Michigan is scheduled for next month," he said. "The prosecutors are confident. With Victor Kane's testimony and all the evidence they're expecting, 18 to 25 years minimum." "And Ohio?" Autumn asked gently. "The murder trial starts in 3 months. The prosecutors there are seeking life without parole." Dominic's voice was steady. "If she's convicted in Ohio and they think she will be, she'll die in prison." Autumn reached over and squeezed his hand. Not performing, not playing a role, just offering simple human comfort. "She can't hurt anyone else," I said quietly. "That's what matters. 7 victims, 4 states, years of damage, it's finally over." When it was time to leave, Dominic walked Autumn to her car while I cleaned up the kitchen. Through the window, I could see them talking by her Honda Rusty, sitting patiently between them. They were laughing about something easy and relaxed, and I saw Dominic reach out and touch her arm, tentative, careful, but real. He came back inside a few minutes later, his expression somewhere between anxious and hopeful. "She's wonderful, Dad." "She is. It's still scary. Letting someone in again. Trusting." "I know, but she's not Genevieve. You can see that, right? The difference." "Yeah, I can see it." He paused. "Autumn doesn't ask about the house value. She doesn't ask about my salary or my investments or my father's assets. She asks about Rusty's training and my favorite hiking trails and whether I've ever been to Portland. She talks about her student loans like they're just a normal part of life. She's not hiding anything. She's just herself." "That's what real looks like," I said gently. "Remember it. Hold on to it. Don't let Genevieve's ghost steal this from you." That night after Dominic left, I went down to the wine cellar one last time. I stood in front of the 1982 Bordeaux section and looked at the Chateau Petrus, waiting there, 44 years old, now worth more than $5,000 on the collector's market. But its value wasn't in the price. Its value was in the promise. The promise Rosalind and I made when Dominic was born. The promise that we'd open this bottle on his wedding day, his real wedding day, to someone who loved him genuinely, who saw him for who he was, not what he had. Genevieve had tried to steal that promise. She'd tried to steal everything, the money, the house, my life, Dominic's future. She'd failed. The bottle waited. Patient. Secure. Ready for the day when Dominic would come to me and say, "Dad, I'm getting married. For real this time. To someone incredible. And I want you to open that bottle you've been saving." That day would come. Maybe not soon. Maybe not with autumn, though I hoped it would be. But it would come. For the first time in 6 months, I slept through the night without waking. No nightmares about coffee cups. No hypervigilance about locked doors. No checking and rechecking the security system. Just sleep. Deep and dreamless and safe. Genevieve Volkov had taught me that vigilance is love, that evidence is protection, that trust must be earned slowly and proven constantly. But Autumn Hayes and her paid-off Honda and her homemade apple pie had taught me something else, that good people still exist. That kindness is real. That the world isn't only predators and prey. The wine cellar was secure. The legal system was working. Justice was coming. My son was healing. And somewhere in that 1982 Bordeaux section, a bottle waited for a future worth celebrating. I lived. Fully. Gratefully. Completely. And finally, blessedly, poison-free. Looking back on those dark months, I realize how close I came to becoming just another statistic in Genevieve's trail of family betrayal. Grandpa stories like mine aren't supposed to end with poisoning and predators. They're supposed to be about wisdom passed down Sunday dinners and watching your children build good lives. Yet here I am, a survivor of one of the most insidious forms of elder abuse. But here's what I learned through this nightmare: trust must be earned slowly, not given freely. When someone moves too fast, asks too many questions about your assets, or shows excessive interest in your vulnerabilities, pause. Document everything. Verify their background. Don't be like me. And wait until you're being systematically poisoned to start investigating. The greatest family betrayal often comes wrapped in concern and care. Genevieve taught me that evil doesn't always announce itself with dramatic gestures. Sometimes it arrives with a warm smile, homemade coffee, and conversations about cognitive supplements. She looked like the perfect daughter-in-law while crushing benzodiazepines into my morning cup. I thank God every single day that I survived to tell this story. He gave me the clarity, even through the fog of drugs clouding my mind, to recognize the patterns and gather evidence before it was too late. Without that divine intervention and my stubborn persistence to trust my instincts, I wouldn't be here today sharing these grandpa stories with younger generations who need to hear them. My advice to anyone reading this: protect your loved ones by being vigilant without being paranoid. Keep your financial information private until you're absolutely certain of someone's character, not after 6 weeks, not after 6 months, but after years of consistent behavior. And remember this crucial truth: genuine love never rushes, never manipulates, and never needs access to your bank accounts or estate documents to prove itself. Family betrayal is devastatingly real. Elder abuse happens every day in homes across this country. But so is survival, so is justice, so is the possibility of rebuilding and finding hope again. That's the real lesson from all grandpa stories worth telling. We survive. We learn from our mistakes, and we warn others so they don't have to suffer the same fate. Thank you for walking with me through this entire journey. I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts. What would you do if you found yourself in my situation, facing someone you trusted who turned out to be a calculating predator? Please leave a comment below sharing your perspective and experiences. If this story resonated with you or made you think twice about trust and vigilance, consider subscribing to the channel so you won't miss future stories. A gentle reminder: While this narrative is inspired by real cases of elder abuse and financial exploitation that happen far too often, certain elements have been dramatized for storytelling purposes. If this content isn't to your taste, feel free to explore other videos that suit you better.